everybody, how's it doing? How's it going? Welcome back to another r/fan reading on the Creepcast subreddit. Today we will be reading something by hold on, let me look at it. Rainy Leech. It's called Spyles. I read a little bit of it, seemed interesting. I have not read the whole thing, so I don't know what else to expect after like the first couple paragraphs. So that's honestly, like I always, I will leave the link in the description if you want to check this guy out. So, all right, let's get right into this digital peach of parchment. No one likes to find a stranger's hair in their food, whether it be an embarrassing moment on a date, a sign of contamination at your local hole in the wall, or a whisper of infidelity in your marriage. It was not a fun experience, so when I pulled the 12-inch long, thick black strand of hair out of my mouth, choking on the end that my throat tried to swallow, I was more than uncomfortable, especially since I wasn't in a dirty restaurant, and I wasn't married or in any kind of relationship. I was 15, in the comfort of my home enjoying a meal our mom had made for us. Our family was small. Me and my baby brother and our mom, all of our hair was pretty short. There was red, and mine was light brown, so I knew their hair didn't come from any of us. "Mom?" I held up the hair to show her. She looked away from my younger brother as she was feeding him in his high chair and inspected what I was holding, her mouth twisted in disgust. "Oh, buddy, what in the world?" "It's hair. How the heck did I get it in there?" I kept holding it. I was really grossed out, but I didn't want to touch the table. Mom pushed her thick, round glasses up her nose to get a closer look. "Well, it must be one of my embroidery threads." "What's an embroidery thread? Can someone inform me of that in the comments, please?" Where was I? "That's the only thing that would make sense. Or it could be from one of the former residents. I'm just so sorry it ended up in your food, bud." She gingerly took it from me. It was wet and cold now, and made my skin shiver as she pulled it away from my hands to throw it in the green plastic garbage bin next to the kitchen counter. We finished dinner, but I couldn't stomach that much more. I helped my mom clean up as the sound of coughing upstairs, busy cars outside, and my little brother playing with his toys. By the time we were finished with the dishes, I'd forgotten about the hair. I brushed my teeth in the tiny yellow tiled bathroom while Mom washed Maddie off in the tub. I looked in the mirror, making sure I got my back teeth as the warm bath made it fog over. "Ben, can you watch him for a while? While I get a towel?" "Uh-huh," I replied through the toothpaste foam. She left the room and I bent down to spit. Maddie giggled and splashing next to me. When I lifted my head up to inspect my face in the misty glass, I saw Mom was back, standing behind me. I grinned for a split second before noticing how tall she was. My eyes drifted up the mirror. Her hair was so long. Mom snapped me back to reality, coming back into the bathroom with a towel. Snap back to reality. Oop, there goes gravity. Sorry, I had to get that out of the way. Coming back into the bathroom with a towel, I splashed my face in the sink and rubbed my eyes. "Don't do that, you'll get an astigmatism," Mom snapped at me, lifting my brother out of the bath and drying him off. I finished up crawling into bed. My mom set Maddie in his crib right next to me. I had this habit of not going to sleep until he did. One time I fell asleep and he climbed up in the crib bars and fell out. My mom had to rush in to get him because I was dead asleep. Didn't hear him crying. I don't know why I didn't wake up. I got chewed out and had been scared for something like this happened ever since. So I waited until his quiet burbling turned into sleepy, tiny snores, and then shut my eyes, drifting off to the sound of his soft breath. I had a dream about being a caterpillar. I was still me, still looked like me, but I was sort of worm-shaped at the same time, almost like a grub. Really? I didn't think a caterpillar would be worm-shaped. It's that kind of dream logic where you keep going back and forth between being two different things, flashing from one perspective to another, like first person 1 second and third person another. Except you're also both things and seeing both perspectives at the same time. Anyway, I was me, and I was a caterpillar, and I was climbing a tree. It was hard because I was so heavy and round, and many arms were short and stubby, like a baby's, except with more joints. I clung to the bark with fleshy, fat appendages, and after what felt like hours, I finally reached the first branch. Heaving with a sense of accomplishment, I hung upside down from my legs and could feel the blood rush to my head. I then opened my mouth wide, too wide, which hurt my jaw. I took my 2 front arms and reached inside my gaping maw. My hands brushed across my teeth, slid over my tongue, and down the entrance of my throat. Ugh. Oh, that's... I felt my gag reflexes activate, and with no control over myself. I grabbed what was inside and slowly began pulling it out, inch by inch. My eyes stung with tears as they bubbled up and ran down across my forehead. But I couldn't stop myself. I felt like my nature. I couldn't fight it. I pulled the thick black strand of hair out of my throat, and as I did, my other limbs grabbed it and began meticulously wrapping it around my body. Around and around and around. It was covered in cold saliva, which helped it cling to my naked, wormy flesh, like hair on shower wall. Weaving layer after layer after layer, the ritual was complete once I was utterly engulfed in hair. Blocking out all sounds, smells, elements, it was complete darkness. The only thing I could sense was the feeling of being surrounded by softness, warmed by my body heat, which made me question whether I was still asleep or awake, snuggled up in my blankets of my room. I felt 2 hands, then 4, reach in through the hair and start caressing my body. I'm still dreaming, I thought to myself. Maybe this was the feeling of being changed into a butterfly, the hands of some unseen creator shaping me into something beautiful. The hands tugged at my clothes and started pulling my hair hard, not with the benevolent intention to change, but the desire to take. Ow! I murmured. I could hear my own voice, could feel the warmth of it traveling up my throat and escaping my lips. As soon as I made a sound, the hand shot off me. There was a rapid trill of footsteps, starting me awake. I sat up just in time to see a flash of white leave my room. Ugh, that's creepy. Ew. I sat in silence for a few seconds, clutching my heart as it hammered into my rib cage. My eyes flicked toward Maddie, who was sitting up and staring at the bedroom door, sucking on his fingers. I opened my eyes, looking up again. The door was still slowly swinging from being open. I swung my legs over to the side of my bed and silently walked to the chest in the corner of my bathroom, grabbing a wooden bat and a flashlight. I looked at the dolefully ticking clock in the kitchen. It was around 2:30. It was storming outside, and I groaned in my head. This cheap apartment building had tiny hidden entry points. For some reason, when it rained, the floor became damp, and snails got in. You had to watch where you stepped. Ugh. Can you imagine just stepping on a snail in the middle of the night as something intruded in your house? Just adds to the gross factor. I searched the cabinets in the kitchen first, under the sink and even the ones over the counter. I scanned the flashlight over the living room, slowly stepping into the dirty brown carpet. I made my way to the yellow couch, looking around and behind it. I nearly gave myself a heart attack when I turned around and the glare of the flashlight looked back at me and the screen of our small TV. I laughed softly at myself and lowered the light, but instead of one figure in the reflection of the black, round screen, there was 2. One of them wore a white, thin nightgown and was standing on the couch. She was very tall. She had long, unkempt hair. I spun around frantically and took a step back, wincing as my bare foot landed on a thin shell that gave away slimy, squishy flesh. Ugh, yep, there it is. I heard a shrill scream, and my disoriented brain told me it came from the poor snail. But when lights flickered on, my eyes were brought to the pink roller and a bathrobe-clad woman in the living room entryway. "Benjamin Michael Hartley, what in the jeezums are you doing at this hour?" Oh, did they really just drop the jeezums? Ooh, okay. Mom whispered shrilly, rubbing her temple. "I thought somebody broke in. You scared me to death." I looked back at the couch. No one was there. "Mom," my voice cracked a bit. I swallowed hard and lifted my foot. Shell of slime and organs ascended with it. I looked down and noticed black hair attached and mixed in with the carnage, dangling from my foot. "Mom, were you the person in our room a second ago?" Her brows furrowed and her eyes widened. Maddie started crying. Mom glanced back and forth between me and our room and hesitantly before going to pick up my brother. While holding him against her chest, we both checked over the apartment again. It was easier and much less scary with the lights on, but the storm still casted shadows over the windows that kept me on edge. Every once in a while, our search was interrupted by a sickening squelch as another snail met its untimely demise in the haste of our mission. No one was there. Mom checked the locks on the door and made sure all the windows were shut. We all tried to sleep in Mom's bed. I think Maddie was the only one who was able to throughout the night. I was able to drift off a bit after the sun began to rise. By the time I woke, Mom was in the kitchen holding our telephone, twisting the tail curly cord anxiously. At one point, her fingers caught up in it, and she angrily flung it off her hand, and she spoke in hushed tones to whoever was on the other end. I silently watched, trying in vain to piece together the conversation. Finally, she set the phone down on the receiver and walked over to me. "Was that the police?" I whispered gravely. Mama let out a breathy laugh and rustled my hair, the details over her sleep-deprived eyes magnified by those spectacles. "No, bud, just the landlord. Asked him to come up and check these things out. I want to ask him about the past resident, too." I looked around anxiously. "Did he look at the security cameras?" Mom smirked and nodded. "Oh yeah, at the last one that worked. Nothing. I doubt he's able to actually see anything helpful in the boxes of junk anyway, though." She must have seen how unnerved I still was, so she pulled me into a tight hug. "Hopefully it was just a bad dream, baby. Nothing more like the ones you got when you were younger." She went to the bathroom to take out her curlers while I sat in the middle of the sofa and waited for Rodney to climb to the stairs to our apartment. My eyes wandered to the TV. Only my reflection stared back. The dull colors of the living room became duller, still in black glass. I grabbed the remote next to me without looking at it and flipped it on, twitching the few channels we got until I reached a colorful static, hissing and singing and dancing across the once black screen. My brows furrowed as I noticed my reflection still there. One with the screen, one with the static, my figure bathed in color and black lines. A snail slowly dragged its body across my reflection's face. I was woken from my stupor by shave and a haircut being rapped on the door. I flipped the TV off and let Rod in. "Benji, hey!" The greasy fat man pulled me under his arm and gave me a noogie. He smelled like tobacco and whiskey. "What's this I hear about home intrusion?" "Don't you worry, yo. Pretty little head, Benji. I got you and your mama covered. Ain't nothing coming in here without old Rod, big fat say so." He winked and pointed two sausage thumbs at himself before tromping through the apartment, checking the door locks and windows by essentially shaking and hitting them. I fixed my hair and followed him silently. One thing I liked about Rodney was that I didn't have time to talk much when he was there. "Alright, Rodney, giving off a little too much energy, but that's just me probably." "There she is, prima donna herself." He walked up to my mom and took her small hands into his big ones, holding them reassuringly. Mom got him a cup of coffee and they talked a while on the couch about everything going on. "Well, now that you mention it, there was a lady here before you guys." "Oh, excuse me." He scratched his beard and squeezed his coffee mug while thinking. "Wasn't a sociable type. Very pretty, though. Very pretty." I pretended to clean the dishes while listening in on the conversation, watching the clouds admiring Mom's plants on the windowsill. Mom leaned in closer to him, clutching her robe and speaking in a hushed tone as if I couldn't hear from 3 feet away. Did she have long black hair?" "Huh? No, actually. Chick had blonde hair, almost white. Very short, kind of chubby, cute, like a little chipmunk." He chuckled a bit more before the laugh faded out into a serious sigh. "Yeah, she died." Just out of nowhere. "Died? How?" my mom gasped. "Well, disappeared if you guys want to get into the technicalities. Happened overnight. Never saw her leave the building." "My word. How do you suspect she died?" Rodney leaned back into the couch, digging into his pocket. "Well, 'cause she left this behind. She always wore it. Never would have left anywhere without it." I peeked over to the living room at what he was holding. It was a snail shell brooch. Of course, I wasn't gonna be the one to fight the police on the findings. Couldn't hurt business and all that. But yeah, she loved these slimy bastards. She twirled the pendant around in his meaty fingers. Kept him as a freaking pets. You know, I think. He leaned forward again. "She's the one that let these damn things into the complex. Dug out holes somewhere nobody could find. That way she could catch him more easily. Some crap like that." Mom let out an exasperated sigh. "Was there anybody who lived here before us with long black hair? There has to be some explanation for it. It's all around the apartment." "Not that I could think of. top of my nog. Lots of people. Been through this here building. A lot of girls, a lot of guys. A lot of guys who brought in a lot of girls. Yada yada. Try not to stick my schnoz too deep in another man's beehive, if you know what I mean. Okay. Doug, he's kind of a vibe now. My mom thanked him after they searched the apartment one more time, and I stared at the plant in the middle of the windowsill. It was a pale green with strangely thin, sporadic leaves that reached up and corkscrewed up in the directions. I didn't like to look at it. I reached up, twirled one of the leaves around my finger. Well, Benj, Donna, Rodney shot 2-finger guns at us. You take care. I'll be scared to call up old Rod if that nightmare lady comes back a-knocking. I've always had a thing for tall chicks. Let out a raspy laugh until he coughed, squeezing out shoulders good and naturally before leaving us. Mom replaced the chain lock with a shink and pulled in the rest of the latches. You feel any better, bud? She asked, rubbing my back. Honestly, not really. I chuckled nervously. She scrunched her face. Yeah, me neither. Let's eat breakfast. Mom called in sick, and we had a really chill summer day at home. Found a channel with cartoons, and Maddie tried to imitate the characters over dramatic voices and expressions while Mom peacefully worked on her embroidery. When I was younger, I watched cartoons with monsters in it. I can't remember what it was called. Something with knights and dragons and princesses, etc. One episode scared me so bad that I had a nightmare. That was me, and I was a knight. I had to get to the princess to save her, so I climbed all the way up to a large stone tower. It didn't have a door, only a window at the very top, so I painstakingly grabbed a hold of bricks and stones until I reached the opening, clambered inside. But the princess wasn't there. The room was empty, except for a big cellar door in the middle. It was red, maybe blue. The color of it changes every time I try to recall it, but no matter what the color was, I knew that I had to go inside the princess was down there. Have you ever had a really cool dream and turn into a nightmare? Roar! Matty was scrunching his nose and opening his eyes wide, slapping my legs as he did the best impression of the cartoon villains as he possibly could. He put his heart and soul into it. Ah! Oh no! I started tickling him. The monster's gonna eat us! Rah! We have to fight back! He laughed until he ran out of breath as I poked him in the ribs. As the day went on, spirits rose. We watched TV, listened to music, ate a hairless dinner, and went to bed. I waited for Maddie to fall asleep. I sat up in bed for a few minutes longer, listening to the rain and watching a snail crawl up in the wall, only to be met with the ceiling blocking his way to the sky. I laid back down and let my eyes close. To my surprise, I was back in that dream I had as a kid. Sitting at the cellar door, I realized why I could never remember the color. It was constantly shifting. Pixels of color moving and changing, hurting my eyes and yet drawing me in. I was me, so I knew what would happen if I went down there. But I was also the knight, and I had to save the princess. I was older now, stronger. Maybe things would go differently this time. I swung open the door, took a step down the long, winding staircase. It was dark and damp and cold. Black, wet vines hung from the ceiling and hit my head and back as I descended. Around and around and around, down into the swirling darkness. The growth grew thick, and I had to begin cutting at it with my sword. At one point, it got tangled up in the vines. I pulled and pulled, but I couldn't get it out. I left it and began working on the vines with my teeth, tearing at them like an animal, obsessed with moving forward. They were so thin and greasy. They smelled horrible. I could feel them getting caught in my throat and between my teeth like floss, digging into my gums and making them bleed. I pushed forward and sat down. Somehow the darkness grew darker in the tangle of these curly masses. My foot tripped over on one of the vines and lost traction with the ground. My body hurled itself down the center of the staircase, straight into the abyss. The vines caught me right before I hit the bottom, strangling against my neck and popping a few of my joints of one of my sockets, from the force of falling. I gagged and groaned and struggled futilely in the black restraints as I hung upside down, blood rushing to my head. I craned my neck side to side. Princess, I wheezed out desperately. I heard my weak voice echo. The base of the tower wasn't large. I knew that anyone who was down there with me would be very close by. Princess! I forced a shout. The echo bounced off the walls violently, making me jump. I heard a very quick, wet drum of footsteps. I aimed my head in the direction of the sound, but blackness surrounded everything. I swung in a circle, somehow encapsulating myself even more in the vines. I swung to look back behind me. There was nothing. But when I came back around, I could make out a vague shape in the shadows, hunched down all and on all limbs each time I made a revolution. She was closer. White nightgown, limbs long and lanky and pale, her entire face gone and replaced with what looked like a giant twisted pucker. Her black hair was up in all directions, sticking to herself, the ground, the walls. I ferociously began biting at the hair, encasing me into no avail. Swung back around, and her horrible face was right up to mine. It stunk. A putrid mix of what smelled like body odor, old milk, and spoiled meat. She brought up her 4 bony white hands to hold me in place. I thrashed and whimpered and bit at the air. An awful squelching noise pierced my senses as her meaty face opened up like a camera shutter. Ugh! Woke in the sight of a large, unblinking, otherworldly eye in the center. Stopped moving, transfixed by her iris, shifting colors at the impossible pace, blending together and yet remaining separate. There was so much love in that eye, so much compassion. Without a word, she told me I didn't need to be strong anymore. She told me that everything that I was and will be and could be worked in unity to bring us together in that moment. Princess, monster, friend, enemy, goddess, devil, all the same time. I didn't have to be the night, and I didn't have to be me. I was allowed to be nothing. I wanted to be nothing. I wanted to give all of myself to her. Long, spidery eyelashes slowly grew and reached towards me, pulling me closer to her beautiful, heavenly eye. I felt them wrap around my ears and neck and braided themselves into my hair. She was her, and I would be her, all at the same time. I woke up to my mom shaking me awake. I could hear Maddie crying in her other arm. It must have happened again. Instead of the disappointed, scowling look I was expecting, Mom looked concerned. She was feeling my neck and my wrist, and I flinched in pain. I looked at Maddie, who was crying and reaching for me pitifully. My mom pulled black strands away from my bruised skin, and the worry on her face turned to determination. I sat on the couch with a mug of hot chocolate my mom made for me, watching the white milk swirl into the brown brew. While she was on the phone, it was still storming outside. I couldn't remember at a time it rained for her so long. I heard my mom swear, and I looked over at her. I can't get a hold of him or the police. The store must be messing with the phones or something. I must go downstairs. She wrapped the robe around herself tighter and went to their room. But you'll be alone, and if she's still in the apartment? I protested, standing up, causing me to spill a bit of my hot chocolate. She came out of her room, brandishing a small revolver, holding it up to show me before placing it in her robe pocket. You can keep your bat ready, but there is no one in the apartment right now. We checked everywhere. The crazy bitch must have snuck out back. Somehow, she's getting through our logs, and I need to talk to Rod about it now, just in case she's still in the building. We can't let her hurt anybody else. There's a lot of elderly people here. The last thing I need is some crackhead pervert breaking into our rooms. She came up to me and kissed the top of my head before looking in my eye. Hey, you're gonna be okay. You are so strong. You have to stay here and look after Matthew. Okay? I nodded reluctantly. She waked up to the door and checked out the peephole before opening it. Lock us up tight. Push a chair under the doorknob after I leave, okay? I'll be back at 10 at most. I was alone on the couch with Maddie snuggled up to me, already asleep again. The rain pattering in the building, the clock keeping track of my apprehension. I watched it from the living room, watched it the second hand go around and around and around 3 times, then 5, 10, 15, shave, and a haircut. I ran to the door. Relief flooded my veins. I looked through the peephole and was happily met with Rodney's big red nose looking back at me. I undid the locks, moved the chair, and let him in. Hey, Benji, your mama around? He asked in an uncharacteristically serious tone. My face went pale. She's not with you? You didn't even pass her on the way up? He scratched his chin in surprise. No. She tried calling me up here a few times. Answered, but didn't seem like she could hear me. Everything alright, Benji? I didn't answer him. I grabbed my bat and flashlight and went straight back to the door. Right before I left, I paused, looking over at our dinner table. I grabbed a pair of scissors out of Mom's embroidery bag and stuck them in my pocket. Watch, Maddie, I instructed before walking out and shutting the door behind me. Yeah, that's a good idea. Leave the child with the maintenance man. I carefully made my way down the beige hallway over the green, snail-infested carpet, my bat propped over my shoulder, pressed the elevator button maybe 10 times before giving up. I swear, everything in this building is broken, I muttered before heading to the stair railing. I looked straight down into the darkness. Oh, shoot. Sorry, I just bumped in my desk. I could have sworn it didn't used to be that deep. Grasping the flashlight with one hand and my bat with the other, I began to descend. I winced as the stairs creaked underfoot. The angles of the staircase were sharp. Every time I turned a corner, I had to steel myself. My head filled with all sorts of abominations waiting in the dark to ambush me. Down the stairs, platform after platform, more floors than I knew were possible. Around and around and around. I held my bat ready as my eyes caught something gleaming on the floor of the next platform. I bent down to pick it up. Round, thick spectacles, cracked and dripping with blood, caked in red. There were a few strands of thick black hair. My eyes trailed it all the way across the floor, leading around the corner and down the stairs. I followed it. Well, looks like the black-haired lady got Mom. As I got deeper, any little light other than mine slowly succumbed to the darkness. More and more. The hair grew thicker and extended across the walls and floors and stairs like veins. It hung from the ceiling and seemed to grab at me more and more as I pushed forward. At this point, I decided to relinquish my bat, dropping it to the floor. I reached into my pocket, pulling out Mom's green scissors. I hacked at the locks of the hair that touched me, making sure my feet were freed up as well as I moved forward. The stairs disappeared, and I knew I'd finally reached the bottom. The room was wide and dark. My light only revealed a foot or so in front of me, obscured by hair and dust. I waited a few seconds in silence, gathering up the courage to speak. Mom? I uttered. Mom! Mom! I cried out. There's no answer, but I could hear movement in the dark. I stayed close to the wall as I made my way around the room. I stopped dead in my tracks as I felt a large lump in the thick wall of hair. I scanned my flashlight upwards until I got to my mom's face, her motionless body entombed against the wall, hair stuffed into her mouth and down her throat. Ew, that's nasty. I desperately clawed at the wall, dropping my flashlight and cutting into the black tendrils. Eventually, I got enough that the rest of the stand snapped, making a musical tearing sound, and Mom slumped into the floor. I slowly pulled the hair inch by inch out of her throat. She lay there unconscious, letting out sick, croaky breaths. I bent down to check on her when something grabbed my ankle, dragging me animalistically to the center of the room. I recognized her smell and the clammy feelings of her fingers on my skin as she forced me onto my back, slamming my head against the concrete floor, making me see stars. Everything was every color. Her face was TV static. Her eye was beautiful. She was two people at the same time. I wanted to be her too. I heard Maddie crying upstairs. It was faint, but shot through the fog. With all my strength, I drove the scissors upward. She stopped the mere centimeters away from her pupil, forcing the scissors away from my hand and squeezing it till my bones cracked and popped. She began tearing chunks of my hair from my scalp. Oh! I screamed weakly as hot tears streamed down my cheeks. I tried closing my eyes, but she used two of her hands to force them open. As I began to fall back under her spell, I felt something crawl against my forehead. Suddenly, she froze in place, as if transfixed. I saw a blur of the snail slowly inch between my eyes, and I took the one opportunity of clear-headedness to kick her as hard as I could in the stomach. She stumbled backward and collected herself, looking up and beginning to clamber back towards me before she was interrupted by getting shot in the face. She fell backwards and looked behind to follow the figure of my mom, limping forward until she was hovering over the sputtering monster. She promptly drove her slippers into its face over and over and over, till it was motionless, soundless pulp. She took a step back and we both watched apprehensively as the bloody pile of ground beef slowly pushed out of the large, juicy eyeball from its center. It rolled onto the floor, all the heavenly light that came from it gone forever. The head of the monster writhed and squirmed as the eyeball was followed by a bloody hand emerging from the carnage, and then a whole arm, and then a whole person. She wore nothing but a nightgown, now standing red with blood. She was completely bald, but her eyelashes were very blonde, almost white. She was coughing and heaving in the air, crawling towards us. My mom immediately went to help her, pulling her up and wrapping an arm around her, and I followed suit. We all walked up the stairs together, and it was a far shorter trip up than down. And even after everything that happened, the climb felt easy. My mom and Rod talked to the snail lady in the living room, asked her all kinds of questions, even though I'm sure they realized they couldn't get all the answers. I washed dishes while they spoke to her, and at one point my eyes met hers. She smiled warmly at me, and without a word, we expressed how thankful we were that both of us had a piece of ourselves that was worth holding on to. I turned off the kitchen sink and watched the water spiral down the drain. Wow, thank you, Rainy Leach, for the story. I like the premise you were going with, but I was a little confused on if it was reality or if he was still in a dream. I like the hair creature that like kind of plagued this building. It's kind of a cool visual. I like the face, how it like opens and closes like a freaking camera shutter. That's a very very cool idea, and I like that a lot. Uh, Other than that, I enjoyed the characters. You did what you could. I'm not saying it's bad, but I was just a little confused on where they were at the time. And I'm not a freaking expert on stories. Okay, I'm just here to read, and hopefully y'all are here to enjoy the reading and the story. So, again, I will leave the link in the description so you can check out the artist. And thank you all so much for watching. All right, you all have a great night. Later.